Are you all ready for some Fire Emblem?
Yeah.
This is FE11 and Mekkah, and we are bringing to you chapters 19 and 20 by Fire Emblem 11 Hard 5 0% gross playthrough. Chapter 19 is going to be a very short one-turn warp skip, which is why it's a companion to chapter 20. Normally this chapter is somewhat interesting because many of the enemy types here do not get instantly destroyed by our forge weapons, for example the mercenaries and the heroes, but all you have to do is to warp Bantu to talk to Tiki and move her off the throne, and then warp Marth to seize the throne. There are many items here that are either in the enemy's possession or that are concealed behind the closed doors, but the only one that we need is the spirit dust that's behind the door near the starting point. It's a bit of a shame because many of the items in this chapter have effects that you will not see in any other game in the Fire Emblem franchise, but we don't need any of them, and in the interest of turn count, we are just going to skip all of them. So let's move on to chapter 20.
Chapter 20 is pretty great. I'm really hyped for it. It's a big map. There's a lot of things going on. The most noticeable thing when I first played it on Hard 5 is that the enemies now have brave weapons instead of their silver weapons and stuff. Brave weapons are very intimidating because they always attack twice, and that means that almost all of our units are getting one-rounded by almost every enemy. Particularly those 4 paladins that are in the lower half of the map.
Yeah, I agree. The first time I played this game and I got to this chapter, I thought it was really interesting that the enemies all have brave weapons, because that's not something they usually see in a Fire Emblem game. Like, you might see an enemy with a brave weapon every now and then at the end of the game, but to have like every enemy who can use a brave weapon equipped with the brave weapon, that's something that's kind of new in this game, because it aimed for like the hardest hard mode possible at this point in the game, and while it's still trivialized by factors such as forges and warp staves, you have to give it credit for trying. So in the preparations menu, we had to promote Katria in order to help deal with the enemy paladins, and we also reclassed Samson to berserker just for the extra strength base, because he's going to need it to help kill a paladin later on in this chapter. The main objective that we have, aside from seizing the gate, is to get Marth to the village that's in the lower half of the map, and this is the last chapter in the game that we're really going to play in a legit fashion. That is, we're not going to be skipping it in the span of like one turn. So until then though, we need to get Marth to the village to get the hammer and staff, which is what enables us to kind of really trivialize the rest of the game.
So our battle stations take out 2 other battle stations using the wolf cycle. This is necessary because they guard huge portions of the map that we need to visit. For example, that hammer village. If we don't do that, then then Marth would just die once he visited that. And Lena also needs to use the hammer in this chapter, so she also needs to be protected from those really strong ballistas. And now we warp Marth right in range. It seems like a very dangerous position, but because the ballista doesn't move, it's actually completely safe, and he's also out of range from the paladins.
Lena's going to join him because she's going to grab the hammer and staff from Marth as soon as Marth gets her from the village. But the battle station is still important because the village itself is in range of the battle station, so we have to kill it somehow. In order to do so, Minerva has to move to this position that she's currently in on turn 1 enemy phase, but then she would be vulnerable to the paladins, and so she has to be protected by the rest of her air force. And so these are basically the only 4 units on our team who can survive a round of combat from the enemy paladins, because they don't get quadrupled and they have enough HP and defense to survive 2 hits. But Sita and Katria both needed axes to do so, and Minerva needed not only an axe but also her A-rank weapon triangle advantage bonus to survive 2 hits. And we manipulated the AI to attack them in a particular order, so that even though their formation didn't look completely airtight, in reality it was, just because the AI is programmed to attack them in that order and not getting up on anyone, even though it seemed like they could have.
It's worth noting that this problem with the paladins has been tackled way in advance. We actually trained Katria just for the purpose of surviving these paladins. Rest in peace, Corleone. You were very useful throughout this whole playthrough. We need Minerva to gang up on this ballista along with the boom spear, just to make it safe, and now Lena can do the whole hammer and warp trick that we just talked about. It's worth noting that if we did this map kind of normally, we'd have to deal with a pretty tough boss. The strongest boss in this chapter is not sitting on the gate. He's a paladin and he's completely free to move around. His name is Kabu, and he's wielding the Gradivus, which is the strongest lance in the game with 1-2 range. Kamu is so fast that he doubles pretty much all of our units, and if he doesn't double, then he probably wanted KOs, and most of our characters, or a lot of them, face both at once. So we really can't deal with him. The only way we could is like using a triangle attack or something.
Unfortunately, the boss I have to deal with is much like Tiki in the previous chapter. He can be recruited with one of our units, in this case it will be Sita, and all he has to do is move off the gate to let Marth seize. It's a good thing that the boss is recruited by Sita because it ends up saving like 2 wing spear uses, so that's a certain plus. Although I don't know if I would credit Lawrence for that. So that's chapter 20 completed in 3 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya.